Welcome back to Thinking Critical. It's time for the Comics Aficionados, basically our Saturday stream where we talk about lots of fun things. You know, sometimes we'll talk about drama, but today we're going to be talking about if you were going to a master's program in college for comic books, who would the professors ideally be to teach, you know, key fundamentals and skills within comic books, as far as, you know, whether it be writing, art, marketing, things of that nature. We got a great panel here today with us. Josh, eating Cheerios. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Almost done my bowl of Cheerios here, so but it's good to be back on the show.
Well, I'm glad you can make it, buddy. You, of course, are the only person on the channel that is currently enrolled in a master's program about comic books.
It's not entirely about comic books, but it's a pathway you can take in the program that I'm in. So, you know, it's not like related. Yeah, it's comic book related. It's pop culture, so, you know, comics are a big part of that.
Absolutely. That's pretty dope. All right. Also with us is the co-host of the Comics Aficionados, Doc. How you doing?
I am still thinking about billiards.
Well,
I'm good. I'm good. let's do this. I'm
also with us, of course, is their curmudgeon of critical himself, Pele. How you doing?
Yeah, whatever. It's raining. It's raining. It's like I got children running around the fucking house. I got all kinds of weird shit going on. I've got a cat that's like stuck in the roof. I don't know. It's a hell of a day. Sounds
majestic. Last but not least is the Poobah of comics himself. Perch, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. I've got no funny stories. I'm just here.
Well, yeah. Yeah, you got to have an anecdote. Like, jeez. All right, whatever. Let's get right into the topic. You know, we are going to talk about if you went to a university, comic book university was real, and they had the most amazing faculty that would get you ready to be the best comic creator in the world. Who would be teaching the classes? I think it's 11 of them lined up here today. The first one is one of the basics. It's action storytelling. Of course, the name that really jumps to my mind as far as classic action storytelling is Chuck Dixon, or the current writers that I would think would be like a Donnie Case. I think he does a great job of telling intricate stories, action-based along the way, and also he does a really good job kind of like separating his stories and explaining things really well. All right, Doc, who do you got? Who do you think, who would you want to teach you about action storytelling in comics?
Scott Lobdell. Honestly, I think Scotty Lobdell is great at it. You know, he surprisingly he does it. He's a little more known for his comedy and you know, character work, but I think his action storytelling is actually surprisingly underrated.
Do you have an example? Where did he kick ass on action storytelling? I can think of Flash Forward is pretty badass.
Flash Forward, he was amazing. His X-Men stuff is awesome. Flash Speed Buggy one shot that he did with Brett Booth like 2 years ago was just awesome.
So it was just the Hanna-Barbera.
Yeah. But if not Scott, then honestly Warren Ellis.
You're bringing some controversial picks out there.
Yeah. The Authority is flat out the Authority. That's the reason. I mean, granted, a lot of that had to do with Brian Hitch, but you know, Ellis absolutely, just between Stormwatch and the Authority, absolutely action story, because that was just straight up widescreen. We've had 20 years of comics as a result of what Warren Ellis did with the Authority.
I don't agree, but I think that somebody came along before him that put his name on it with authority before that, and he stood on their shoulders.
Well, who was that? Who's your guy for action storytelling? Or Pele?
Frank Miller.
Oh, now we're
Daredevil. He absolutely, the way that he described a blind man during a fight, and how that, I just remember that stands out to me so clearly. The death of Deathstalker and how that moved into Elektra joining the series, and the way that he paced his action sequences is just phenomenal. And that same energy, that same pacing came forward in The Dark Knight Returns, and just some of the most iconic fights in comic book history were written by Frank Miller. And I think that a lot of what we see today, as far as the scripting and the way that fights are choreographed in comics, it comes from Frank Miller. And also before that, Steranko, because Steranko was very good at pacing as far as the brevity of line and the I know that comes artwork, but still just the way that he worked with the storyteller to seamlessly fit it together. But anyway, aside from that, Frank Miller is me the number one action storyteller.
All right, Josh, you're the new guy. You're the guy that's actually enrolled in a program based on comic books. Who do you think is, like, when it comes to action storytelling, who's your go-to?
I'm not copping out, but I think I'd have to go with Chuck Dixon on that. It's just the way that he writes, street level action is really good. If I had to pick someone else, I would probably go with Sean Gordon Murphy. His stuff in Batman White Knight was really good. Like, I remember that scene where all the Batmobiles, they were racing all the Batmobiles out. That just looked incredible. So I would probably go with Chuck Dixon or Sean Gordon Murphy. Either one of them is a pretty good pick for me.
Yeah, I like Chuck Dixon. He always incorporates action, like into okay, there's something boring going on. Let's do it with action. Let's incorporate the exposition and everything while something is happening. I think that's really important with comic books. Nowadays, you do see a lot of conversation-driven narrative, which I don't think serves the medium of comic books all that well. You might as well just make record the conversation and put it on the radio. It's just as effective.
And I think with Sean Gordon Murphy, it's sometimes a little difficult, though, to separate Sean Gordon Murphy, the writer, from Sean Gordon Murphy, the artist, in that regard. So I'm not sure how much that is his writing setting the pace for action or his art.
Well, in many ways, Sean Gordon Murphy might be the Frank Miller of his time. Frank Miller was basically considered the best writer-artist probably in history. And I'm sure that his ability to write and visualize things in his head certainly aided his ability to do action storytelling.
Oh, there was a good point here. Caleb Latingua, Warren Ellis run Moon Knight was just amazing. It was. That's a point for Doc there, because I'd kind of forgotten that one. His action storytelling in that series was on point. It was excellent work.
Especially his comment about, like, why do you wear white so they can see me coming?
Yeah.
Birch, we haven't heard from you. When you think about action storytelling in comics, what writer really floats your boat, or who would you like to just sit down with and get to talk to him about it, just so you could find about the fundamentals of writing great action-based storytelling?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm in prep for the show. I was thinking about a number of different names across different things, these different categories. And one of the things you hear it kind of in all my answers is I'm in addition to the concept, the action kind of storyteller, I'm thinking about somebody who, as a professor, somebody who's teaching, who would be a teacher, who's got the personality of being a good instructor, and who's shown the ability to make money off their stuff that isn't relying on, say, Marvel or DC to do that job for them, which I think is linked. If you're going to be a successful writer, yes, you have to write a great story, but you also have to think about the business. Long way of saying I would throw out Robert Kirkman on this, and the reason why, a lot of people would think horror, right? He does Walking Dead, but his run on Invincible was pretty much, it was like, it was a masterclass on action storytelling, superhero storytelling, and it's a template, I think, for people to copy. And so I would say Kirkman would be a great person to teach a class like that. I agree with some of the other.
You can kind of see with Ryan Otley's artwork in Invincible, where he's got someone like Kirkman writing the story and setting everything up. Then you see his artwork on Amazing Spider-Man with Nick Spencer, not known as an action-based storyteller.
Yeah.
Invincible is much better artwork.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. I think Invincible, you can tell, same artist, but you can tell that Kirkman knows how to set up action sequences, knows how to pace issues for action. And I would say, even though Walking Dead's going to always be his claim to fame, Kirkman's other work, it shows he's a good action storyteller. And the action in Walking Dead, was pretty high end too. The other one is one he just put up, actually, Mark Millar. I think Mark Millar is... there's a guy, again, who knows how to do really good action beats. His stuff on Old Man Logan, absolutely right. He does good action. His Millar World books very much have a lot of those that feel to it.
His Authority?
Yeah, His Authority. To me, His Authority, you mentioned Warren Ellis. I don't think that's not a bad pick. And in addition, you learn how to pick up the ladies, which is cool. But it is... I think that Millar's run on the Authority had some pretty amazing action beats. The fight with the bad doctor was one of those epic fight scenes that I think you'll remember.
Oh yeah, that was the most twisted shit I have ever seen, and it was
action.
Yeah, and it was just wall to wall action.
So Mark Millar is my second pick. You beat me to it, Caleb, but I totally agree with you. And then for, as one last name to throw out for, also ran Jim Starlin, I think would be interesting to throw into that mix as well, as a guy who does action, but also sets up characters. I think. Yeah,
I was thinking, but more this character setup as far as he was one of the ones I'm thinking of as far as that. Go ahead.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Mark Millar took essentially Mags Visaggio's Kim and Kim concept and kind of revamped it for his Miller World. Go read in Kim and Kim and go read I can't remember the name of it. Is it Space Bandits?
Yeah.
Space Bandits, yeah.
Go read his Space Bandits.
I think every other issue was free or something like that.
It's a completely different class just as far as action storytelling. They're always doing something to move the story forward. It's never just there's dialogue and exposition, but they're always moving along to get something done. I think that's really important in comics.
Yeah.
So let's move. Oh, sorry.
No, just action writing's tough. I think there's a lot of comic creators today. I hear it dismissed, like that's kind of cheap storytelling. But action storytelling, the people who do it right are geniuses in how to put it together. It's not.
It's so awful, really, when you read a comic and it's like there's all this exposition and narrative, and then you got all the talking and everything like that. Then bam, boom, bam. There's like 3 panels of punching, and then it's over with, and then and then they talk about it for about another 5 or 6 pages. And that's not the way it should be written. That's not the way it should be done.
Yeah. I think there's one more that we forgot. Garth Ennis.
Yeah.
But yeah. All right, let's move on.
All right.
Well, we're going on. This one's an interesting one, and it's building lore and connective threads. And there's some great writers with this. The one that obviously pops in my head is Alan Moore with what he did with Saga of the Swamp Thing. You think about what he did with Watchmen, what he was able to build in just, was it 12 issues on that one? Obviously, Chris Claremont's run on X-Men was all lore building and connective threads. There are connected threads waiting to be finished from Chris Claremont's X-Men run. And then kind of, those are the 2 kind of big ones that stand out in my mind. Hertz, when you think of lore building and connective threads, who do you think really does it like at a master class level that you would want to learn from?
I mean, Chris Claremont is that guy. I think he was the connective threads, big world building type people. I think if we're talking somebody contemporary, by the way, Chris Claremont would be perfect because he's got nothing to do right now. He's just collecting a check,
and he's pleasant.
And he's getting less pleasant as years go by, but yes, still very pleasant guy. Probably, if somebody completely different in that same vein would be maybe Brian K. Vaughan might start to get some of that reputation. I think I know Saga's not to everybody's taste on the panel here, but there is somebody with a long-term plan and a lot of different characters and different balls, plates spinning in the air at the same time. And that's really what this is. It's building a giant world and building a lot of different pieces that you or other people can connect up to. Hickman has this reputation as well, but I'm not. I'm a little less. I don't know. I still like Hickman. Don't want to upset the X-Men stands in the room, but I think that his connective thread ability is it's not as marketable. Now, granted, he's making a lot of money with X-Men, but if you look at his independent work, he's not able to market as much as some of those other guys. And so I said Brian K. Vaughan has a track record of he can do it and he can sell it pretty much consistently every time. So that's why I throw him out there.
All right. Anybody else got any thoughts about lore building? I know, Doc, you want to talk about Claremont, right?
Oh, yeah, it would be absolutely Claremont. I mean, there's no doubt about that. The guy would have. He was the master at putting you had the A plot for every book, but then you had a little bit of a B plot, and then you'd have a panel or a couple of panels or a page of a C plot or sometimes even a D plot that would pop up in almost every issue, every other issue. And there'd be something like way down the line that was building towards that modern creators just don't have. I don't know if it's they don't have the foresight to do, if they're told not to do it, because it does make it jarring for trade collection or what it is.
Because when you look at like the old trades, and it'll be a story, and it'll be like the first 3 issues of this Spider-Man, 2 pages of Iron Man Annual number 4, 16 pages of this special, and then the 2 more issues of Iron Man. That's the story.
Yeah, and that makes it it does make it very difficult for trade collection. But it was a reward for longtime readers. It allowed new readers to start getting an idea of the scope of this world that they were getting into, without like burying them under information. It was really good at long-term planning. And as Perch said, there's still, decades of he has decades of this stuff. There are threads that he never even touched that he started setting up. That guys like Fabian Nicieza, Scotty Lobdell, Joe Casey, Joe Kelly, Steven Siegel, they made their entire careers off of picking up the scraps left from Claremont. But I think if there's somebody other than him that does it, Peter David.
Yeah, I was gonna get that. You stepped on me.
Oh, sorry, man. You can go ahead then and explain why.
Actually, I want to kind of chop this up real quickly into 3. One, Jack Kirby, King Kirby. I know that people artwork again. I know. I'm talking about like with the Eternals. I'm talking about with the New Gods. As far as the connect, as far as building a world, building a place, that people, that others come and they work with. But in Stan Lee, of course, who set up more characters than Stan Lee? I mean, set up more world building than Stan Lee. But Peter David, God, that Hulk series, he basically almost single-handedly put Marvel together in the 90s, in the 80s. I mean, he apart from the mutants, he was world building and placing connective tissue for all the stories to come and all the series to come after that. And modern Donny Cates, I mean, he's still got a ways to go. He's got to prove himself in the in the long run. But what he's writing right now, a lot of what he's laying down and what he's already picked up from previous writers. Cates is going to be, somebody that's looked at in 30 to 40 years, I feel. As long as he keeps going the way he's going.
We got to get some payoffs.
Huh?
We got to get some payoffs.
Yeah.
And he needs to set up other kind of
right.
B and C plot stuff that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not, like I said, I'm not completely sold on him yet, but I think that he has the potential there to be one of the greats. But anyway, yeah, I'd say overall though, Peter David.
All right, Josh, I feel like you have a more contemporary, modern writer that you want to bring up. I've got to guess, but who do you think is great at building lore and connected threads with characters?
Geoff Johns.
Oh, that's a very good one.
Yeah, he just knows DC to the core of it. Like what he did with Rebirth was just he tugged on every single corner of the DC universe in that one book, that one Rebirth one shot, and started just kind of pulling all these threads together with that. Unfortunately, there's still stories from that haven't been resolved, or the conclusions to them have been altered since then. So we'll probably never know what the true goals to some of them were, but I would have to go with Geoff Johns. Some other names, Scott Snyder. I don't think he's perfect. He definitely has some flaws, but I feel like the lore building that he did with Batman through the New 52 with the Court of Owls and stuff was really good. And I would also have to throw Chuck Dixon's name in there too. Like what he did with the Batman family titles in the late 90s through the early 2000s. You had him writing Nightwing, Robin, and Birds of Prey. And those three books just kind of blended together as one. He did crossovers between the three of them. And it was kind of like, you never had that jarring effect of like, oh, now I'm reading Nightwing, now I'm reading Birds of Prey. Like, there were stories that he did that crossed over between those three books where you couldn't really tell that you switched books. The lore he built for, around the Batman family and those characters during those times was as close to perfect as you could get, I think. But if I had to pick one, it would definitely be Geoff Johns. I mean, he's just, he's just really, really good at that stuff. Like, he's good at this all expansive universe wide lore and setting up these threads. Look at Three Jokers. We're pulling these threads out 4 or 5 years after the seeds were planted, and the book is selling like hotcakes. So, that just shows that he knows how to do his job. So, yeah. Another
one that comes to mind, it was just brought up, was Robert Venditti. He doesn't really get to do this at DC Comics so much, although he certainly did it with Hawkman, where he took the current lore, expanded it out, and made it a more fully fleshed out character. But if you go back and you see what he did at the relaunch of Valiant with Exo Man of War, who was like the flagship character, he was also doing all their events kind of at the beginning. And he had a huge, he was a huge part of the success of that shared comic universe and him building out the lore and the characters and things like that. Hopefully Robert Venditti gets that chance on Superman. I'm definitely with Bronze Age Byron here. I do hope that happens in the future. Nolan Nerd, I do want to say there are no super chats available because the channel still isn't monetized because I still haven't received my pin. I was hoping to receive it 2 days ago. Still haven't. Hopefully we get it next week. There have been people receiving pins in this town over the last few weeks, so hopefully that comes in very soon. It's been very frustrating, obviously, on my end, but we're still going strong here. We got a bigger vision in mind, and hopefully monetization, everything will be back online next week. Within the next few weeks. And I do appreciate you checking in, and hopefully it'll be back very soon. So the next topic we have here, I think this might be the hardest thing that we're going to talk about as far as writing dialogue. Writing believable dialogue. Yeah, these characters have so much history. There's so many different kind of versions of the character. It's hard to really channel one, the right voice for each character. The name that automatically pops into my mind is Geoff Johns. I think he can essentially write every main DC comic character with a correct voice. Their interactions always feel like they're correct. When Batman is interacting with Hal Jordan or with Hal Jordan's interacting with Flash, it always feels correct. It feels organic the way that he writes them. And I do think dialogue is probably maybe the hardest skill out there. Josh, like, who do you think of when you think of like just writing dialogue?
Oh, when I think of perfect dialogue, Jim Starlin comes to my mind.
Not Bendis?
Oh,
it's clearly Bendis.
What was I doing?
No, the plentiful dialogue, yes. Not good dialogue, no.
Yeah.
Angel, sweet comic angel, Bendis.
If I want to rip my ears off, even though I can't hear words, I would definitely read a Bendis book. But if I had to go with anyone, I would go with Jim Starlin. It makes me specifically look back at his work on Batman. Batman to me is a very strange character when it comes to dialogue. But Jim Starlin managed to kind of like capture him perfectly. Like whenever I would read Batman's dialogue in a book written by him, it just kind of like had this natural flow to it. And I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but I always hear Kevin Conroy's voice, for Batman whenever I read a comic. So, but it just sounded natural. It flowed really well. He had that kind of detective mindset and aspect. So I would probably say Jim Starlin.
A really good Batman current day is Brian Hill. I don't know that he's the best action storyteller, although I think he's very talented. But his Batman voice for Batman always feels like Batman.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Agreed.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry. But yeah, Jim
fine.
Starlin, obviously, he's more known for his cosmic work, but he certainly had some really cool stuff to do with Batman as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Doc, what do you think about writing dialogue? When you think about somebody that writes nice, crisp dialogue with the character, the interactions feel correct. Who's your money on?
I would have said, okay, now I'm going to preface this. 1999 through 2004 Bendis. Everything after that, it went to hell. But around 2004 is when he just started going off the deep end. But for those 5 years, he wrote incredibly that felt like real people. Then he turned that up to like 11 wasn't enough. He needed like 14. But other than that, Joe Casey. I always felt Joe Casey really kind of he felt like he was writing real people. And he's not the most well-known of writers, but I'm thinking a lot on his time with at Wildstorm with Wildcats, and then his time on the Cable comic in the, I guess that would have been the late 90s. That always felt really good. It just felt like I was reading, like they were fully fleshed out people. Claremont, I loved him in spite of the purple prose. They don't sound like real people. They sound like comic characters, but they fit the characters so perfectly.
You know what's interesting, Perch? We always complain about how writers are writing young characters today, and I guess I'll get some hate with Caleb on this one, but I've read a lot of Impulse by Mark Waid. Mm-hmm. He writes a damn good 12-year-old with ADD. That isn't the smartest person in the world.
Writing from the heart.
You read that, and it feels right.
No, Mark Waid is good. I mean, I think for dialogue and kind of like Bendis, I think the last 5-10 years or so maybe haven't been as kind to him. But there was a time when I think Mark Waid had a really good sense of dialogue, and I think he did it right. I mean, the name that popped up with dialogue, I think Denny O'Neil is somebody who
damn good.
Yep.
I think just pitch perfect dialogue. But another name I'll pull from the past, who's I think one of my favorite writers of all time, Louis Simonson. I think doesn't get anywhere close to the amount of credit for. I mean, you look at the stuff that she did across the board of gods and mutants and children characters and adult and everything else, and the voices always sounded accurate. It never felt like you were reading some, abnormal. It felt great, and she would come in and put her touch on characters without it changing the character. I mean, her X-Men work. Or X Factor work, it followed Claremont without being a Claremont clone. I think that Simonson is one of those people that just one of the brilliant writers from the time. I think really responsible for a lot of the the building during that period that doesn't get anywhere close to the amount of credit she should.
She gets overshadowed by both her husband and working alongside Claremont.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a sad commentary.
It is, and I think I think that she definitely deserves a ton of credit for everything she's done.
She probably needs more spots on those like anthologies, and when they're kind of bring the old greats back. I think what did I see? I've only seen her in one lately. Like, why isn't she writing a bunch of these?
Well, I mean, this is I'm sure this would irritate some people, but bluntly, I think Marvel does a really crappy job of respecting its female talent, especially from the past. With all the stuff they talk about, there's a lot of women that were in the halls of Marvel in the 80s that they couldn't give the time of day to today, and that's
because it would put the lie to the argument they're making today that women haven't had a spot here before.
Yeah, I mean they have a lot of credit for putting some amazing female creators on the page, and in the 80s and before a lot of other people. DC would get into it later. Another great name would be Rachel Pollack over at Vertigo. I think is another good name for this, but it irritates me. Marvel does a really terrible job of respecting their female talent from the 80s and the early 90s. They just ignore them. Invisible women.
I do want to say shout out to Dark Admiral March here. Remember to smash the like button. That is a great input. Absolutely. If you're enjoying this conversation, you want more content like this, definitely give us a thumbs up. Let everyone else know that you're having a good time. We're having a great conversation here. And thank you very much to Dark Admiral March here. I think he's essentially been with us since the beginning. He was here when we had like 14 subscribers.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So here's another one that I remember the first thing I read by Chip Zdarsky was his Peter Parker Spectacular Spider-Man. And the first 5 issues that have some of the worst dialogue I've ever read in my life. Like, it was painful to read. Then all of a sudden something switched, and his dialogue from here on out is just like kicks ass, Pele.
Most improved. I'll say most improved dialogue goes to Chip Zdarsky. Because by the time he reached his stride, he was one of the better active writers as far as writing dialogue. I'm going to throw in well, it's kind of seems like cheating, but oh god, my mind just went blank. Oh crap. Oh, Sandman, Watchmen,
Neil Gaiman.
I can't believe my mind. You ever had that? You just brain fart like that?
Absolutely.
My MS must be flaring up. But yeah, Neil Gaiman, my God, just read Sandman. If you want to talk about dialogue for the first, I mean, it is just phenomenal.
Well, it's also, you could have been definitely in there for lore building.
The way that he turns a phrase, the way that the gods talk to each other, the way the mortals talk with the gods, and how, that series alone has the best dialogue of the best character dialogue of any series ever written. It is just phenomenal. And, it puts me in mind of I know that people say this a lot and it's not really true, but it does put comic books into the realm of literature. And
there's definitely a few writers that are able to do that.
And he's one of the few. So,
and Pele, I agree with you, and I think that during that time period, in that kind of 90s, early 90s era, that's why I mirror up Rachel Pollack as well. I think that those writers were putting a lot of depth. That was when comics were a little bit more shallow in the mainstream, and so you had people who were really putting in effort with characterization and dialogue, and that was why Vertigo during that time period was so incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's people were thinking that Vertigo was going to be coming back. I don't think they realized just how daunting that task would be, considering how good Vertigo used to be. It would have taken an effort of heroic proportions to even get close.
So
it benefited from a moment that you don't have today, and this is where today the indie comics are not indie anymore. It's a lot of the same storytelling over and over and over. And if you look back at the early 90s, the superhero books were getting very, very clone-like. All the teams had the same kind of makeup and a lot of that of how they existed. So Vertigo was a natural reaction to that. And the indie comics were truly indie. Today, it would be very hard to recreate Vertigo because the indie comics are carbon copies of each other in a lot of cases. It's superhero comics that are more unique. It's a bizarre flip.
You'd have to do actual superhero stories.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we've kind of covered, the three big topics as far as writers go. Let's kind of get into some of the artists. And I'm going to go right back to Vertigo for sequential storytelling. It's so important. Obviously, sequential storytelling or visual storytelling, the awards are named after Eisner for a reason. But just when I think about Saga the Swamp Thing, what Stephen Bissett was able to do with the way he would draw your eye in and tell the story visually, still like nothing I've ever seen. I don't think anyone's ever quite been able to recreate exactly what he was able to do in that comic. And I still find it fascinating to look at, Pele. Like when you think of sequential storytelling that it just guides the eye and it just, you want to read more. What artists jump in your head?
Steranko. He invented it. The man invented the process by which drawing comics on a page and attracting the eye and drawing the eye around the page. There are panels and whole pages that he drew back in the day, especially during the Nick Fury series, that are still heralded today as the best artwork of its type. And it is, at the time, it was so far ahead of its time that everybody's like, what is this? This is weird. They were used to 9 panels on a page, tell your story, and he was just like, I don't need panels. Who needs bloody damn panels? There you go. I'm going to this whole page is a panel, and I'm going to draw your eye from the left to the right, all the way down here to the bottom right, and then to the bottom left, and then toward the center. And I'm going to tell a story that would normally take 8 pages in this one page. And it's just, it's jaw dropping. You don't need dialogue boxes, for some of his work. It's just, you could sit and you could just look at it for like half an hour and pick out new parts of the story involved in that. And he was decades ahead of his time, and it blows my mind every time I go back and I look through those early 70s and late 60s work that he did. Jim Steranko. I don't think anybody at before or since has quite touched what he did. This is my opinion.
I can't disagree with a single word you said there. I mean, no, seriously, the guy is. There are so many storytelling techniques that Steranko essentially pioneered or created that everyone else has copied for 50, 60 years since.
Yeah.
Did he do the one where you get the main character in the circle and then you get all the little things that go around him? I like that one.
I don't know if he pioneered that one.
That one's dope.
There was the one where Nick Fury was having the dream, and the whole dream was drawn in one page, and you could actually make out what the dream was about. I mean, everything. You could see, okay, he went through this and this. Oh my God, this. Then the rest of the book is about that dream sequence. One page, and it's like 24 pages followed one page, and it worked perfectly. It was just wow.
For my taste, I would go with. I'm kind of torn between Art Adams and Paul Smith.
Yeah.
Paul Smith is another guy that doesn't get anywhere near the attention that he deserves. But I just always come back to his X-Men run and the ability for him to tell a story with you could entirely eliminate all of the dialogue, and you'd be able to know exactly what the story was telling you.
Mm-hmm.
And plus the fact that some people bring up like somebody like Tradmore, and Tradmore's very good. I just don't like his art style. So for me, the sequential storytelling kind of goes along. I still have to like your art style. But
you talk about the storytelling. You mentioned Art Adams, the Long Shot series.
Yeah.
Read the Long Shot series. Oh my God. Blow your mind.
Yeah. And now for somebody a little more contemporary, I'd actually go with Sean Gordon Murphy. And, as we discussed earlier, it's kind of hard to tell the difference between Sean Gordon Murphy, the writer, and Sean Gordon Murphy, the artist. And they go hand in hand in that way. And that's, it's perfect. He even I remember whenever he was doing White Knight, he even showed exactly how he'd lay out each panel, each shot to entirely draw your eye into that like inverted, Z shape, that Z shape to move your eye down the page. It was amazing.
All right, Josh, do you have any more contemporary artists that you think are just amazing visual storytelling?
I'd have to go Sean Gordon Murphy for sure. If I had sort of a lesser contemporary one, I'd probably say Scott McDaniel is really good at that. He did like the first 40-ish issues of Chuck Dixon's Nightwing run, and I know he did most of Ed Brubaker's Batman run. His art style, you have to have a certain taste for it. I hated it when I first saw it, but then as I read more of it, I grew to love it because I felt it was really good at sequential storytelling and things like that. You never really needed the dialogue to be on the page to kind of figure out what was happening. And he just made simple things like, swinging through the streets or, like just kind of hanging out on a rooftop. He made it look really dynamic, which I thought was really, really good. So if I had to go with a more contemporary pick, it would be Sean Gordon Murphy for sure. If I had to go with a somewhat less one, it'd be Scott McDaniel.
McFarlane,
plus
Bagley.
Scott McDaniel's a great dude and very, very personable. And he actually, I got a couple of lessons from him when I was younger on art, and he's a great teacher.
Perch. You would need that.
Oh, go ahead,
Perch. Who do you want to teach you how to do sequential storytelling?
It's funny. I did an hour talk at a local college here on this topic, actually, and so I'll go with some different names. I agree with a lot of those that have gone on, but I also, if we're talking sequential art, if you're talking big jam page or you're talking amazing,
that's the next topic, son.
Yeah. So there are a lot of the names that we just talked about. I'm definitely putting in that camp. Your Burns, your Adams, etc. But first off, Scott McCloud has not, literally using that word correctly, written the book on sequential art, and that is definitely somebody who understands the craft and how it goes. Mike Allred, I think, is very good, in particular about panel by panel sequential art. Paul Smith, that has been mentioned, was a master at it. Darwin Cook is somebody who gets overshadowed in this area, but in terms of sequential storytelling, just brilliant at doing it. And then another guy, unfortunately, passed away as well, Steve Dillon. Steve Dillon really knew how to handle panel by panel sequential art, both for Preacher, for The Punisher. I think Steve Dillon is genius at it. Paul Pope, Tim Sale, Ben Templesmith are other people who are really good at that. And then, outside the U.S., because we spend a lot of time, Scott McCloud, exactly. Rumiko Takahashi in Japan, and Kohei Horikoshi, who of course does My Hero Academia, is very, very good at that sequential art storytelling. For going over to Europe, Alberto Derzo is probably the legend there for Asterix and other books of sequential art. So there you go. There's a ton of names, and try not to eat up the time, but sequential storytelling is a really hard skill. You can be an amazing artist and a bad sequential art storyteller, and unfortunately,
it could be a real inhibitor for readers if you've never read a comic book and you come in on some of these, somebody that doesn't really know how to guide your eye, you'll be lost.
Exactly, and it's funny because on Twitter, Eric Larson likes to give a lot of every now and then he'll come in and throw shade at artists for not being good sequential storytellers, but I don't think he's the best sequential storyteller himself. I think he's very good at those jam pages, those big pages, but in terms of panel by panel, a lot of people can talk, but actually pulling it off is a much harder skill.
Stan Sakai. I want to just drop a
good name. Yep.
You wouldn't need dialogue on most of his stories.
No, you don't. I mean, there's some issues of Usagi Yojimbo that probably have like 5 word balloons. Mm-hmm. And the rest of it is just a beautiful story. It's just a beautiful story told in sequential art.
Yeah, it's like the perfect intro comic for a new reader.
It is.
If they're younger.
Mm. Well, even teens, it's I usually, when somebody's usually asking what's a great comic for my kids, I used to pull Super Sun, stuff like that. And now I'm pulling Usagi Yojimbo.
Yeah, you get a little parable in there. You get a nice, easy story to read. Characters are great.
You know, 2 other names. 2. Kirby. I mean, he is still a great sequential storyteller. But also Jose Ladron.
Mm-hmm.
So nice.
Brett Booth.
Yeah. Brett Booth's very good at it.
So I think Brett's more in the next category, the dynamic art.
I was kind of holding for you.
Yeah, dynamic artwork's really, really important. There's so many, like you can have the coolest scene ever, but if nothing's flowing and it doesn't feel like anything's happening, it can be kind of droll. But like the one guy like that's modern that absolutely jumps to my mind for this one is Jorge Jimenez, his work on Batman right now. Obviously before that, Super Sons, just a great artist as far as dynamic artwork. But I go back in the day, obviously Todd McFarlane, Jim Lee, all the Image guys, even Liefeld. So Doc, like when you think of dynamic artwork, somebody that puts it on the page and it just feels like something is happening constantly. Who do you think of?
Silvestri, Mark Silvestri, without a doubt.
Image guy.
And other than that, I would say pretty much all of. Okay, you had Silvestri and Lee. And now, granted, if you went back even further, you have basically Art Adams, who all of these guys made their entire careers following in the footsteps of. But between the guys that Top Cow and Mark Silvestri put together, and the guys that Jim Lee at Wildstorm put together, you have probably the best group of. You could pick pretty much anybody out of that, that were one of the proteges of either of those guys. You have Michael Turner, you have Talent Caldwell, you have Brett Booth, you have Doug Mankey, you have
Willis Portacio.
Willis Portacio, because he came out of that.
Stepping on everybody's picks.
Yeah. But I mean, look, they all come back to Art Adams, and then the next generation, which are Silvestri and Lee.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the only guy that, other than that, would be, I'm going to have to go with Silvestri, though, as the best, because he can make even, look at X-Men 244, where the girls go on a shopping spree. And he manages to turn that whole comic into something super dynamic and fun. Girls going shopping, he managed to turn into something awesome.
All right, Paley, jump in there before someone else steals your picks.
Oh, Todd McFarlane's my pick. I mean, I could probably sing the virtues of Brett Booth or Art Adams, but McFarlane blew the doors off when he went into ASM in 298. It's just boom, everything stopped in the comics world, and it just, he absolutely just ripped it up. And I think that artists today are just still copying him for the most part, and it's just amazing. Nothing changed. The comic book world changed that moment, and I don't know if anybody else has changed the comics world as much since or before. And the only one be similar like that would be Bagley, but he's very, very focused on one character that he does that well with, and everybody else, all the other characters are kind of meh. But as far as just dynamism and action on a page, and just like the incredible visuals and the way that the action flows, and it just sort of nobody did it like McFarlane, and I don't think anybody's done it quite as well since.
So Perks, when I think of like dynamic, there's nothing worse than like a splash page and there's nothing cool about it. Like, shouldn't every splash page be awesome as hell?
Yeah, and I think there was a comment made earlier that I think was really, really smart, which was you look at these eras, you look at people actually transformed and changed things. And I think Todd McFarlane was a moment in time that changed things. I think John Byrne and George Perez, further back, changed things. Like Art Adams, I completely agree. He doesn't get the credit that I think a lot of modern artists owe their careers to Art Adams and kind of how he changed things. I think these are people who created amazing, and then you go further back. I think Steve Ditko, Jack Kirby were in this era of people who just made amazing splash images. Unfortunately, there's not a lot. I mean, Ryan Stegman is holding it down today. I think that Greg Capullo is kind of in that camp today.
Joe Bennett on Immortal Hulk.
Yeah, I think that you've got some people. Joe Bennett, by the way, I think we're at the beginning of that moment, kind of like Todd McFarlane came onto the scene, and it's like, wow, this is pretty incredible. And then over about 4 years or so, you saw it really refine and get sharp. I think Joe Bennett is at the beginning. I know career-wise that's not true, but I think there's I think there's another evolutionary step coming for him. It's just a prediction as an aside, but I think a good way to look at this is look at the posters. And I was at a Target yesterday, and they're selling T-shirts of Marvel characters. And who's on these T-shirts? It's Todd McFarlane Spider-Man art. It's Jim Lee X-Men art. It's John Byrne.
I'm wearing an Art Adams X-Men T-shirt right now.
Yeah, I mean, but this is Target. I mean, this is a mainstream store, and what's Marvel selling? They're selling no piece of art on those shirts was under 30 years old.
Unless it was Bagley. Bagley's the only other guy.
You do see Bagley show up, but it is interesting to. I think if you can get an amazing artist like that, I think we've done a few here, but Frank Quietly, I think had a little bit of that as well. Brian Hitch, so there are definitely some. Mike Ringo is a great example as well. Darwin Cook, I always love, but not maybe in the same camp. And I'm a sucker for Sean Gordon Murphy. I try not to mention Murphy and Booth. Obviously, I'm big fans of those guys and everything else, but I think those guys are both just killer at what they do and their craft as well.
Contemporary Lee Bermejo. Oh,
another wild form guy.
Yeah.
Another guy that trained under Jim Lee.
Wow.
I remember when I saw Action Comics 1000, I saw his cover. I was like, never mind. That's what I'm getting.
If you saw, just the way that the lighting, if you had like a category just for lighting and the way that the, lighting effects, Lee Bermejo. I mean, just boom, that Batman Damned, it was incredible.
All right, Josh, like who do you think of when you think about like dynamic art, like something in motion just looks cool, catches your eye, you're like, I want that on a t-shirt.
Oh, Jorge Jimenez. His stuff on Batman has just been amazing. There's been times where I've just taken pictures of the pages while I'm reading them with my phone, and I'm like, man, I wish I could get a poster of this, like just to hang up somewhere. It's amazing. I mean, you guys already kind of rattled off some of the better names like Jim Lee, Greg Capullo, Todd McFarlane. Like those are just absolute must-haves when it comes to like splash pages or dynamic comic art. One Brett Booth as well. He's really good. One name I'd like to throw in there that I don't feel like this. I'm not sure if like this guy just never gets work or if he's just new or something. He was on the first 20-30 issues of Williamson's Flash run. It's Carmine D. Juan Domenico, I think is how you say it. But he just did this dynamic art with speedsters with the lightning that follows them, and he would like draw trails behind like where they were moving with the lightning. Oh man, it like when I would read that, I would just stop reading the dialogue and just enjoy the art. The dialogue didn't matter to me. I just enjoyed his his rendition of Godspeed and Reverse Flash were just it was so good. So if I had to go with like kind of an off the wall, lesser heard of pick, it would definitely be him. But as far as modern comics go, it would definitely be Jorge Jimenez without any doubt. Like he's going to be a superstar. He's amazing.
Oh yeah, Jorge Jimenez. That's the one that really pops in my mind. Like just some of the stuff he's doing with Batman. I think right now Batman like has been kind of boring as far as the storytelling, but the visuals and the dynamicism of the visuals has been off the charts. Obviously, I loved him in Super Sons. Such a waste that's not still going on. All right, we got a lot of great comics. I love the people in the chats being all interactive on this. Everyone's got their opinions, and we got a lot of great stuff going on in the chats. I do want to say before we move on to the next our topic, if you're enjoying the conversation, give us a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed, what are you waiting for? It's time to subscribe to the channel. We do this every Saturday, people. There's great conversations about comic books. Not very much drama on over here. This is a drama-free zone that's basically just for comic book fans. All right, so the next one I think is really important. And when I think of character design, this could make or break a character. Obviously, you're going to have input from the writer or whoever's creating the character, but it's really the artist that has to put their stamp on it. And, you know, when I don't know, has anyone ever done a better job, Perch, than Steve Ditko creating Spider-Man?
No, I think Ditko is. I mean, just overall. I mean, just not Spider-Man's. Ditko created amazing characters, great costumes, great unusual things you haven't seen before on the page, and kind of this little known talent of his is he created designs others could replicate. So not every costume was the easiest to draw, but you get this problem with a lot of current artists where they create they're costume designers, and they create things that are almost just so time intensive, so difficult that other creators come on and draw it and it looks awful. I think Ditko's is incredible at this. I think Jamie McKelvey is actually very good at this. He does create costumes that pop. And I think he's a good character designer where that's concerned. Art Adams, to his credit, I think Rob Liefeld, who takes credit for all kinds of things, he doesn't take enough credit for creating costumes. People always think about it with pouches and everything else.
Yeah, he invented pouches.
He invented the pouch. But you look at a lot of his early New Mutants and X-Force work when he was creating these characters, and outside of the pouches, he created interesting comics. He's very contemporary. He understood kind of popular trends and pop culture and what was going to fit with a page. And I think he deserves definitely some credit there. And I always feel he takes too many knocks for his pouches. But probably, again, I think George Perez was also a master at this. Just great character design. Today, I think contemporary, this is an area where probably modern artists suck. The most.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
I think character design is absolutely, even like, I do think Pepe Larraz is an incredible talent, absolutely, as an artist. I think his costume design is often not always the best. I'll just put it there. So,
yeah, I would probably throw Alex Ross in there. Somebody else mentioned Alex Ross, Adam Hughes. This way that Adam Hughes revamped most of the DC ladies. I mean, I don't know if anybody realizes that. He's like, oh, this doesn't really look good. Let's make her appealing again. It's like, boom, oh wow, okay. And that's I'd probably think those two. John Byrne, Burns X-Men. Holy crap!
He He is, but somebody in the chat is mentioning this as well right now, and Dave Cockrum, I think, deserves at least half the credit there. A lot of what Byrne did, I think Dave Cockrum also teed up. For sure.
Those are great books, by the way. They came out with the X-Men Cockrum and Byrne archaeological editions, and which you get the actual, you get the photos of the actual
editions.
Yeah, that's what they are. They're just big, huge slabs of book, and it's amazing because you get to see the actual pencil strokes and what they were thinking and how they changed their minds and went, and it's just like, wow, they're hard to get. I know I make references to things that are like Finding Dragon's Teeth, but if you get a chance and you happen to see it for a reasonable price, do pick those up because they are amazing.
I legitimately can't think of an artist in the last 15 to 20 years that is any good at, like, on a regular basis. I'm not talking about like, oh, he did one good character design. He's only designed one character and then he just copied everybody else. Nobody's creating large swaths of characters. So you kind of have to look 30 plus years back. And even a guy who I think is a great costume designer, Jim Lee, totally dropped the ball on the New 52 when he was doing the redesigns for New 52. Everything there was bad. Well, not everything, but he dropped the ball miserably on New 52. But if you look at his X-Men redesigns, because he did a lot of the designs for Gambit and Jubilee, the redesigns for the Imperial Guard, a lot of other stuff. Plus, he did all the designs for the early Wildstorm stuff, so Stormwatch, Wildcats.
But a lot of that. Would you say, Doc? I'd say a lot of that was very derivative. I think if there was one weak spot of Jim Lee, I think his costume design he had a couple tricks, and he it's like you said. I think they were kind of new at the beginning, but then as time went on, it's like he's just recycling the same stuff over and over.
Yeah, after he did, you started seeing it on Wildcats, but he also did a bunch of really interesting stuff on Stormwatch. So. Even though Stormwatch wasn't all that great in comparison, at least initially, I thought that the costuming was much more unique. But and then you saw it with he did a lot of the designs for Gen 13 before handing it off to J. Scott Campbell.
As far as I wanted to make a point here. Somebody mentioned it in the chat. Sequential storytelling, Dave Sim. I'm not going to forget Dave Sim because some of the Cerebus stuff in sequential storytelling is still used today in graphics arts to teach sequential storytelling. So in Cerebus, so I'm going to get back to that. I wanted to touch on that because he is amazing. But yeah, the as far as design though, there's who else who has not spoken yet.
Not sure. I just got back.
I think I'm the only one who hasn't said anything. Yeah. This is kind of tough.
Do you think Capullo's being kind of left out here? He's got all those weird designs of Batman for all the Dark Knights. Obviously, those all are derivative, but most of them are pretty dope.
So I would probably say Capullo would be my number one pick. He came up with the redesign for Batman's costume with Batman Rebirth. When he had like that gold rim around his emblem and the purple on the inside of his cape, which is probably my favorite like design for Batman's costume ever. I definitely agree with what Doc said about Jim Lee dropping the ball on New 52, but I think for what for all of the concept art he did for DC Rebirth, he did a pretty good job at redesigning his portrayal on, many characters' costumes. But I would probably give it to Capullo. Here's the reason I own statues of all the evil Batmen from Dark Knight's Metal, because they just look awesome. And he designed all of those. So I would probably say Capullo. if I had to pick one for this category.
Although, Perch, you got to admit, when you see like the new concept designs from Marvel, whenever they have a new team, generally speaking, it's embarrassing.
Yeah, no, that's why I say I think, as I mentioned before, I think Pepe Larraz is an incredible artist, but as a costume designer, not as much. I mean, there's a reason why Marvel goes to Alex Ross and goes to Jamie McKelvey to design these costumes, even though they're not active, doing comics. I think at Marvel. I mean, I think there's an art to designing a costume, and it's not easy, and it's you can be a great artist and not a good costume designer, not a good character designer, and it's it's a talent. The big thing that's lost kind of in this is that there once upon a time you did have the idea of like a character Bible or a story or a character guide, and you print these things in Marvel and in DC. You'd have these character sheets that showed how they stood from a front view and a side view and everything else. And you just that doesn't exist anymore. That there's no, I mean, some people keep it, but it's not a requirement. You don't have a house style for this stuff. And I think that's where we've lost a lot of that skill.
Well, I think we'll end it on that one. So there's another aspect, obviously, of art, and that is comic book coloring. This is something that it's probably, like, I don't know a lot of great colorists. I know a few here and there, but kind of like the one that I think of Pele is just like a great colorist is like Laura Martin.
Mm-hmm. Mrs. Brightweiser, I can't remember her name. She strikes me. I always love her coloring work. But you're right. It's an area of comics art that a lot of people, color is one of the first things that you notice, but it's one of the few things that people are heralded for. So, it's.
Yeah, I should probably bring Brett on the channel and have him school me up on coloring and like the history of the discipline, because I feel like I'm weak.
Probably Tim Liam. I would think of he's an amazing colorist. But gosh. I don't know who you have in mind.
Certainly Hollingsworth. Yeah, he's obviously does all the coloring for Sean Gordon Murphy's.
Matt Hollingsworth is very, very good as a talent.
Yeah, he's really great with subdued colors. He makes it looks cool. Like Perch, who do you think about? Who would you want to learn coloring from?
No, I mean, I think Dave Stewart for sure is the name. I think Laura Martin that you mentioned is incredible. Dave McCraig. Alex Sinclair. I mean, there are a lot of good. I mean, colorists make the book in a lot of cases, or maybe put a different way, can ruin the book very, very easily. And especially with this advance to doing everything in digital, the color, the color is really, really important. If you screw that up now, it's a lot more clear.
A lot of visuals are oversaturated nowadays. It like washes everything out. Like you don't have any depth or anything because they don't understand the palettes they're using. Feels like.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know. I think there's a lot of people. I think Paul Mounts, who did the Ultimates, is an example of somebody who brought some really amazing things to the table. And then you have people like Mike Mignola and Frank Miller that have done their own coloring at times, and that's of course really, really solid. But Laura Allred probably is another person there. I don't know. There's a bunch of. I think colorist. It is definitely something that needs to be focused on more. But it is like kind of letterers, only lettering is to a lesser extent. That's probably something that people really need to focus on more. Lynn Harley. I think.
Yeah. Most of the ones I know, like I know FCO Placencia, obviously he does all the work with Greg Capullo. Great colors. Yeah,
I think, there's a lot of people. It is one of those cases where if you're teaching a class, I'd want to go further back to the 70s and 80s and really kind of focus on there. So
it's one of the problems I have with modern comics today is just the heavy use of pastels. And it's especially on covers and stuff like that. They just don't grab people's attention. It's kind of like an almost effeminate quality to it that I know they're trying to draw women into buying more comics and stuff. But, I think that's coming at an expense of, guys are like, oh, is that for girls? Is that I don't get it, and they may pass a book by just because of the color choices.
An artist that I think really gets color, who is of course an artist as well, as Steve Rude from back, who did Nexus and a lot of. I mean, Steve Rude understood the dynamic and the relationship between art and coloring. So a lot of good names. Jordi Bilar, I think. Yeah, I mean, there's some. Again, these are not names that roll off your tongue, but it is something that definitely deserves a lot more credit. And I do think as we get to more the fusion with more digital work, not digital comics, but drawing, creating in digital, I think the colorist is going to become more important. I hope. I was talking to an editor yesterday who said they're experimenting more with having the penciler, the inker, and the colorist be one, and that to me is
terrible idea.
Absolutely terrifying.
Atrocious.
Yeah.
They're trying to save money and cut corners in the wrong places.
Oh, sure. It's saving money. And it's the fact that you have a couple artists who have done their own graphic novel work, who have, of course, done everything. And that's great when they can do it. But when you're working for the big two and you're working for a monthly, sub kind of book, you need a team. Having cutting corners by having one person do all, it's like, hey, we'll give you an extra, $15 a page, which is the rate I've kind of heard floated around, is nightmarish for coloring. But this comment by Dominic Powell, I think, is right on. I think what you're seeing is people who have grown up on Wes Anderson and to some extent Stanley Kubrick and people like that, who see very limited color palettes. Wes Anderson is kind of a master at having a very fixed color range and then bring it to the page. And that sounds good, but again, you have to understand why a Wes Anderson is doing that and not just trying to replicate technique.
Yeah, it sets a mood and a tone for the story. If you're doing an action-based story, Wes Anderson might not be your go-to.
It's not your go-to, yeah.
Well, depending on which Wes Anderson you're talking about.
No, we're talking. You're talking about the indie film darling.
not the Resident Evil one.
No, I'm talking about like The Life Aquatic.
Yeah,
kind of.
No,
Royal Tenenbaums.
Yeah. Mobius did it wonderfully, and I think he understood kind of color range and how to do this stuff and the pastels. Yeah, exactly. Mobius knew how to do that really, really well. If you understand color theory and you understand the mood you're going for, yeah, it can be perfect. But if you don't, if you're just trying to say you watched, Ratched on Netflix and you're like, hey, that color palette's pretty swank, I'm going to use it in Spider-Man, probably a bad idea.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're already seeing the problem with Marvel and even DC to some extent doing this with skimping on inkers and basically having a lot of the colorists do some degree of inking. I already don't like that. You eliminate so much of the contrast and everything looks muddy as a result. I think you'll see more of that. You'll just end up with muddier and muddier comics.
Yeah. I know, Doc. Why don't we have superstar colorists?
We never really did. I mean, and I think honestly, trying to hype up colorists as superstars is even a worse idea because you end up with every time you start giving colorists more and more, the further they've gotten from 4-color, the more muddy their comics look. I'll be honest. I don't like it. They too much tone and texture and everything like that makes for a muddy looking comic. You can't tell what the hell's going on half the time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, Josh stepped out. Are there any colorists in your head where you're like, man, that guy can really color a comic? Anybody that you would like to learn from?
Brad Anderson for sure. Guy's amazing. He's done quite a few of DC's biggest books over the past couple of years, and he did the coloring on 3 Jokers #1, which is probably the best coloring I've ever seen in a comic. So I would definitely say Brad Anderson.
3 Jokers is one of the best illustrated books I've seen in a few years. So Absolutely. Another name out there, Kyle Ritter. What he did on Cyberfrog, just amazing stuff.
Yeah, I think we poop on Cyberfrog Cyberfrog a lot for the storytelling, because there's really not much storytelling. It's kind of hard to read as far as a cohesive story, but there are elements of color work in that are absolutely stunning.
Yep.
And there's some beautiful work in there too, as far as the artwork, as far as the large splash pages and stuff like that. The eggs and stuff like that, when they're doing that one part of Cyberfrog, and he's showing the eggs and everything like that off, in the distance, and the subtle hues, gold tones and stuff like that. And it's gorgeous, absolutely freaking gorgeous. And I agree, Kyle Ritter. He's really, really fantastic.
It's too bad he'll probably never get to work on the big two.
Yeah, his work on Starblades, his own independent book. Oh my God, the art and the coloring on that, it's unreal. It's really good.
Mm-hmm. So moving beyond comic book coloring, what are the big things that, if you're going into a master's degree, you probably want to be in some type of management or leadership. We're going to kind of get away from the art here for a minute. What are the big things is actually managing a comic book line? Some names come to mind. Obviously, Stan Lee. I think about Jim Shooter. Josh, who would you want to learn those principles from on how to actually manage your comic book line? Keep your ducks in a row, keep your characters fresh or hot. When do you want to do the big tie-in event? When's the time to reboot? Stuff like that.
Probably Jim Shooter would be my pick. He's pretty good at that. I think Scott Snyder might be coming into that role in his future at DC. I think he would be. He's very good at promotion and trying to kind of build longer term storylines. So I would probably say Jim Shooter would be the proven talent that I would have on it. And maybe in a couple of years, Scott Snyder would be capable of teaching that as well. Maybe Marv Wolfman as well, but I kind of feel like Marv Wolfman does a really good job at that stuff, kind of in the behind-the-scenes role. But I would say Jim Shooter would be my number one pick.
All right, got any other ideas out there, fellas? Who do you want to learn from, Doc? Who would you want to teach you Comic Books 101? This is how you manage your comic book publishing line.
I would obviously have to go with Jim Shooter. I think that he, from a business standpoint, like a mix of business and creative.
Aren't you supposed to be able to deal with people as management? Wasn't that one of his downfalls?
Yes and no. I mean, I think that he's able to deal with people. He's just not able to deal with artistes.
Yeah.
He's fine with dealing. Look, anybody that's in commercial art needs to understand that they are in commercial art. They are not artistes. If they want to be artistes, go find themselves a landed gentry, a time machine back to the 1600s, and a boat ride over to Italy.
Yep.
If that's what they want to be. But
get the Pope to write you a check, and he can be your patron for a while.
Yes, exactly. But if you are in comic books, you are a commercial artist, and Jim was fine with dealing with commercial artists. It was whenever they got too artsy fartsy that he had problems with them. And
was John Byrne artsy fartsy?
Personality wise, he was a little bit.
Yeah, he was a little bit of a prima donna, but he's nothing like today.
No.
Steranko was a bit of a prima donna, but nothing like today. So.
Yeah, I mean, but I'd say maybe, from a pure business standpoint, yeah, I think Shooter. I think for somebody that can, I guess you could say, understand the mind of the artist and the creative side a little bit more, Hank Canals and Bob Harris, Mark Silvestri. I mean, he managed, even in the late 90s, to keep his Top Cow line, on time, monthly, with all of his stuff coming out, all of the artists under him that he was training, and kind of handing off duties to Michael Turner, Dave Finch, dozens of others. He managed to keep that line, and honestly, I think it would have been a much more commercially viable line had he not let his ego and his fight with Rob Liefeld cause him to pull Top Cow away from Image for that year or so.
Yeah, if I couldn't get Jim Shooter, then probably Todd McFarlane or Dave Sim. Anybody can get an indie comic to run for 300 issues, and to keep Aardvark.
There's only one comic. We're talking about a comic line.
Aardvark Vanaheim. He kept it running for 35 years, and that's amazing. That's an amazing achievement for an indie running out of Kitchener, Ontario. So he did a great job with that. He wrangled a lot of talent with a very, very limited budget, but I think as far as personality goes, keeping people in line, being able to keep artists going, and being able to wrangle a lot of personalities, I'd say Todd McFarlane. If I couldn't get Jim Shooter.
Perch, who would you want to learn the ropes on how to manage your own comic book line from?
Yeah, I think right now it's Robert Kirkman. I think that he's got an imprint. He understands that piece. I mean, managing a comic line right now has to be a combination of scheduling, understanding. It's knowing your market, being able to do a pitch, understanding the competitiveness of what's going in with the genre of the comic you're doing, understanding timing of launching. I don't think Kirkman has been perfect by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm getting to Karen Berger, actually. You're just exactly right. That'll be next on the list. I think that the one thing I do like from Kirkman is that he's explained his mistakes and what he's learned from them publicly when he's launched something like with Die, Die, Die and some of those others. And I think that's really clever. I also think he understands better when to shoot for Hollywood and when not, why you have to create a comic book and create a line and create a property and get it stable before you start talking about optioning it off for Netflix. I mean, I think he understands that. If you're going, and Karen Berger, of course, I think deserves 1,000,001 credits for everything that she was able to do. And then the third name I throw out there is Mike Millar. I think Mark Millar, not Mike Millar. What am I saying? Mark Millar. Sorry,
it's his not blind cousin.
Very, very different thing there. No, Mark Millar is absolutely. I think a pitchman. He is the current Stan Lee in terms of being able to do these things and kind of tee them up and understand. Now he's wandered much further into the out of comics producing kind of role, but there it is. And I mean, Jim Shooter is interesting because we talk about that all the rest. But I think if the business climate changes and the name of the game changes decade to decade, and I think the Jim Shooter of 2020 would be a way different ballgame than the Jim Shooter of the 80s. And I just think, responding to the current business climate and what's going on is a key factor. And right now, I think Kirkman, Karen Berger, that's probably where you put your money.
Well, absolutely. Most of the money to be made in comic books is your idea or your IP being transitioned over to other mediums.
Yeah,
that produce more money.
Well, I think Kirkman's weakness in that, I said it in the chat, is that he doesn't have to worry, while he's managing a line of books, he doesn't have to worry about managing that they actually work together because all of his books are separate.
It's true. I think that's a good comment. What I'd be curious about is, Kirkman's comments around the Ultimate line when he was working at Marvel and doing some of his own promotion, and how Marvel rejected it. He was saying the right things to indicate he knew how to keep the plate spinning together. He just hasn't been given that opportunity. I'm curious if with Skybound he starts to tie some of this stuff together. But But you could also argue he recognizes that right now his best chance of winning for his line is to keep them separate and run them as separate properties that he can spin off with the talent he has. So maybe he's responding. But that's something I agree with Doc. I'd love to see if he can do that or not. Otherwise, I'll do it for my car, like people in the chat saying.
I would love Dinesh Shamdasani is one I would like to sit down. I just think the way that he managed a small connected universe at Valiant was brilliant. Obviously, he didn't quite have the marketing skills because it didn't really blow up like it probably should have based on the quality of the creators and what the stories that they were doing. But just managing a line and keeping continuity straight, I would love to sit down with Dinesh Shamdasani. So whoever brought that one up in chats, I don't remember who it was. Absolutely well done. We're also hearing other people saying Paul Levitz. Obviously, he used to run DC Comics.
We were talking about, who would take over on DC Comics. Jeff Johns. I mean, can't forget Jeff Johns because he is really, really good at pulling continuity together across multiple titles.
But he's never really managed a lot.
I know.
He's like a creative director.
But yeah, he would be a really good creative director. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's too bad they didn't let him completely do his vision. So let's talk about something that would be more new and something I think every creator probably should know about. The principles of crowdfunding, not being beholden to DC and Marvel, being able to hold on to the rights of your own creations, being able to market your own book, be on your own schedule is all very important, Perch. Like when I think of principles of crowdfunding, I mean, getting your IP out there, getting your idea, and then being on schedule, never being late, giving your customers exactly what they wanted, and having them come back for more and growing the audience over time. Like there's three people that kind of jump in my head. We'll see what you think. Obviously, one would be Tim Lim and Mark Pellegrini with what they're doing with their iconic comics. I think they're a part of that. Actually, your boy Zach seems, after a couple of FUBARs at the beginning, seems to be on schedule. He puts out a lot of new ideas. He seems to put his books out on time, although it looks like his numbers are actually shrinking. So his audience might be shrinking over time. And then obviously the gold standard, I guess, would be Brian Pulido in Coffin Comics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Zach is really, really good at the crowdfunding as far as the coordination, but I'm just not a fan of his writing. So, I think that's where he's falling right now. Is a lot of people just are just not really digging his writing.
I think Zach's problem right now is he's jumping genres a little too much, and playing with experimenting with properties too much, and that's part of the problem. I think he needs to focus on his major properties, his Jawbreakers and Iron Sights. A lot of his other ones, his Pandemic and something with stars. I don't, not interested. And I think a lot of his primary audience isn't terribly interested in those either. They're more interested in more standard superhero fare or crime. And he's kind of hitting it with those two, but he's not really a sci-fi guy. He also, his promotion has been a little weak recently. But I'd say Pulido. Pulido's probably, and you know what? As much as I think he's kind of a jackass, Ethan. Yeah. Ethan is good he is a great hype man. That's
solid. Marketing. We're talking about principles of crowdfunding, fulfilling. He hasn't really shown a propensity to be able to fulfill his products or projects on time.
That is a valid point.
That would be my concern.
Yeah. But Pulido and Zach are probably the two better of those at the moment.
I think that probably, if I had to pick, it would be Lim and Pellegrini, because they're like, hit it. They're like, we're going to have this out. We're going to put all these products together. We're going to package them. We're going to get them out to you, and it's going to be a phenomenal product. And they do it time and time and time again. And it's always great. There's excitement in this house when the box shows up from them. and it's quite something when something gets my wife excited about comic books. So they're just consistent.
Is she excited about the comic, or is she excited about the plush bunny?
Both. She loved her bunnies, but the comic, she's an artist. She's a sculptor. So, and she absolutely adores that little frickin' bunny rabbit. So, and she loves the premise behind the story. So, and then also POTUS Thump. She's a big POTUS Thump fan. So, it's but they are right now. I think that they are the best in far as crowdfunding right now.
They're certainly they have a process, and they put their products, they always put them out early now. Now, Josh, I know you're a prospective creator. You were thinking about maybe becoming a writer. I'm not sure if that's still in your future, but who would you want to sit down and just pick their brain for a week, or have them teach you in a classroom environment? This is how you do crowdfunding. If you want to enter the market, this is how you identify your audience. This is the time frame that you should be using. This is when you should do this. Who would you want to learn those basics from?
Probably Tim Lim. He seems to be, and I have some more radical opinions on crowdfunding comics. I'm a little out there. Probably Tim Lim, because he seems to have his head on pretty straight. Seems to be a pretty down-to-earth, sensible person. I do think that Zach, your boy Zach, is good. When he, like you said, when he kind of focuses on the genre that he's good at, he's good. I've noticed he's been branching out into other things, and it just hasn't been doing well for him, because I think he's trying to do things that he's not good at. He needs to stick with things like Jawbreakers and Iron Sights. I have very strong opinions on EVS and Cyberfrog. That stuff, it's like, no. I won't get into that now. That can be talked about in another day. But I would say Tim Lim. He seems to be, like I said, a dude who has his head on straight. He's not too over and out there. He seems to be a pretty good guy. He knows what he's doing. So
yeah, I wouldn't hold those 100 people overseas against Doug TenNapel, because I think that some people were really out to hose him on those, because how many times it take to get something delivered to someone? I mean, he shipped 4 books to one address. So until he finally just refunded. But it was, I don't know.
Well, that was his first campaign. There's always a learning curve.
But he's also a great choice to learn from too.
Absolutely. So, Perch, I know you talk to these people as well. Who would you want to have some time with that does crowdfunding, that you really think that you would get the fundamentals, how to do a successful crowdfunding campaign?
Yeah, I think Plato is a good one. We've done the names. I think depending on how we're asking the question, if we're asking about fulfillment and kind of what makes a good market, it's interesting because as I'm listening to this, a lot of the names that have been brought up can do one piece or another. I'm trying to think of the person who has the full package, who can do really good hype marketing, understand the market before the crowdfunding begins, get things prepped, do the promotion, fulfill it on time, follow up with stuff. I think a lot of people are getting better and better at it. And I think a lot of people can claim that they're experts in one or more areas, but not all. I don't know anybody's the full package right now, but people are getting better and better. And I think this is where, you can kind of turn off your brain of whether you like the individual or not, or how they're doing it. But I mean, you can talk about EVS. You can talk about Jimmy Palmetti. Somebody mentioned in the chat is a good one. Alex DeCampi, who I'm sure a lot of people are not terribly fond with, has pieces of this that has done well. I think that lots of people can do this. And no, Ron, I promise I won't go down to business talk. But I think that what you are going to see is over the next 2 years or so, you will see some experts kind of arise out of this. And when I say experts, I'm not talking about writers or artists or creators. I'm talking about people who know to shuttle your project, from beginning to end, true marketing people. And I don't think those are comic book people. I think, they're different people.
I think a lot of the people that claim to be that thing right now are full of shit.
Yeah, there's a lot of self-hype.
There's a lot of people out there that claim that title. Heather Antos, Joseph Illich, who's Camilla Zong.
Greg Pak has made comment. I mean, there are a lot of people who
claim expertise in that, but honestly, none of them are.
Yeah, I think that anybody who's claiming they know how to do it is faking it right now. Maybe it's marketing of itself. You don't know how to do all pieces of it right, and it's not been a well-oiled machine for anyone at the moment, completely from end to end. But
who was the goober that wanted to charge like $300 or $400 to teach people how to do crowdfunding comics?
I believe that was Heather Antos.
Oh God,
she wasn't that comics experience. The comics experience. That's who was teaching the class. So in fairness, she didn't set the price.
Billy Tucci, which again somebody brought up in the comment, is a good one there. There are people who know bits. Nobody has been able to string the entire end-to-end picture together, but I think that you're seeing some skills out there, and the person who's going to pull it all together is a person who's going to come into this and not worry about Heather Antos or Ethan Van Sciver or DeCampi or Tucci or whatever, and they're just going to say, what are the things that work with all of these people from end to end, and put them together and be able to have a package, and that's what's
also translate the property outside of crowdfunding.
Yeah, and not do it for a get rich scheme as well. I mean, and that's where I think the Antos and some of those other people, they come in and they're looking at it as how can I make some money off of a quick class, or glom on to the back end of somebody else's crowdfunding, and those people are going to get washed out pretty quickly. You got to bring value.
It's likely to be somebody with connections with a Hollywood agency, more than likely, some sort of agent.
Hopefully, it's somebody who's taken a business class.
Hopefully. Honestly, even somebody with connections into the toy industry would be somebody good with that. But Todd's still only barely dipping his toes in the water himself. So,
but boy, if he can pull off his crowdfund right now, considering the magnitude of it, if he can pull all of that off on time, he'll be one of the ones to talk about.
He doesn't really crowdfund comics though. Those are statues.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, just as far as crowdfunding in general, because he right now I think is almost over his head with how big that campaign went.
I don't think so. I mean, it's well within his wheelhouse as a toy manufacturer, to be perfectly honest.
But there are comics involved with it, and there are it's a package deal. It's a huge deal as far as some of those packages.
All right, so let's get kind of to the last two. I know, Doc, you're about to dip out here in a minute, so this one's going to be yours.
Yeah.
What are another fundamentals that it feels like a lot of creators don't have a great an idea of marketing to the masses? And a name you just brought up, obviously Todd McFarlane comes to mind. He seems to be someone that everyone likes. He puts a product out there, people seem to gravitate to it. Who would you want to learn how to market comic books, comic book properties out to an audience beyond comic book readers?
Actually, you know what? I mean, as much as McFarlane is a great hype man, he doesn't do it enough. Liefeld is getting his legs under him doing that, but right now I'd have to say that Ethan is still the best kind of comic book hype man for selling a property. He does, regardless of my thoughts on him personally, he's a great pitch man. He basically does, like 6-hour Dick Clark, PBS telethons, to sell people stuff. And he gives, he sells it, and then he brings the creators on to sell it too. Because the thing you're going to have a problem with is, most creators out there are generally pretty introverted people. and you have to be an extrovert to get out there and sell stuff. It's the reason why Stan Lee was such an effective pitch man at being the face of Marvel, whereas Jack Kirby put in probably 10 times the work and, influence, but he was more of an introvert and like to just sit behind his drafting table and draw stuff. So you need somebody that's actually out there and able to talk. And I think Liefeld would be great for that. I don't know if he has really any interest in it. He's much more interested in talking about Liefeld. And comics history, and sharing his love of comics history, but he doesn't seem to be really terribly interested in just pushing for new stuff. Ethan is great at that, regardless of what you think about him personally.
Yeah, if I had to pick somebody, you'd have to resurrect him, but it would be Stan Lee. Stan Lee and McFarlane. Those are, in my opinion, that's 1 and 2. Nobody was doing a better job, pitching comics back in the 60s and 70s than Stan the Man. And he made comics during those times. The comic industry, without him, there wouldn't be a comic industry today. So, my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Perch.
Well, who are you thinking, Josh? Who would you want to learn about how to market comic book, IP, comic book stories outside of comic books, to getting the word out to the masses that this is something you should be excited about?
I hate to say it, but I think Ethan would be my number 1 pick. It's an old saying, and that I know from my parents. Ethan could sell an igloo to an Eskimo. He just knows how to market things to people. And I'm wholeheartedly convinced that a lot of the audience that buys Ethan's Cyberfrog book, they don't read any other comic book. They're just buying it to support his work, which is basically what you would need. He's proven that he can sell. So I would see Ethan would be my number 1 pick. And the Todd father, Todd, would be number 2 for sure. There's a reason why Spawn is over 300 issues now and has never been rebooted. That was his thing, and he's just a really good hype man as well. So,
all right, Perch, who would you want to sit down with? Who do you think is the comic book person that can tell you how to take that idea of yours and get it out to the masses so there's wide appeal and people know what the hell you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to sound like the broken record for my other picks, but I think it's Kirkman and Millar. I think those are the 2 right now that have the crossover. And I say it from this perspective. It's being able to take a property and say, take the politics out of it, take the individuals out of it, take one side or another out of it, and be able to market to everyone, and to be able to put out something that has got mass market appeal. And I think those 2 are probably the ones that are doing it the best right now. I think definitely better than the people at the big 2. And I think if we're talking crowdfunding, we're talking marketing, where Ethan is concerned, he is able to market and sell very effectively to his audience, but he also has his audience. I think if we're going to go outside of that audience, I think that's where it falls apart. He's not going to be selling comics outside of his audience. And that's the trick. Now, I think he'll probably work on that and try and figure that out, because you ultimately need to grow.
But his audience does transcend comics. It isn't just comic readers. So you.
Oh yeah,
in that aspect.
Absolutely. Yeah. No. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. It's when I say audience, I'm not saying for one particular genre. I'm just saying you to be successful. There's a business fundamental around a ladder. You got to keep climbing. Every year you have to grow your audience, and I think that's the challenge for a ton of people, not just Ethan, everybody. That's the challenge Marvel and DC are in right now. They're actually working downward, not upward. And you hear a lot about we've got to sell to a new audience. You hear a lot about we got to get new customers and new people in. That's what everybody's saying. But who can actually do that? And there's that is a very small list right now who can actually grow outside of where they currently are. And so for my money right now, that's probably Kirkman, and that's probably Millar as the people, and maybe a lot more Kirkman in this case, who could claim that reputation at the moment.
I think Kirkman's great at Kirkman and Millar are both great at selling to Hollywood. But I mean, until their stuff actually gets on TV, they don't sell comics these days. I mean, they really don't. They don't market to them either. I mean, Kirkman, I never see him really out there marketing his comic to comic readers. Miller doesn't either.
I don't know that I agree with that. I think both of them hype. I think Kirkman's done a lot of Skybound comments lately. Millar just hasn't had comics. I think he was gearing up for a big push here in the fall, and then the pandemic slowed that down. But I also preface my comments by saying I don't know if anybody's perfect at this. But the key to being successful is you got to be able to take your market and then you got to double it. And how do you double it? It's hard. And that's the skill that we're looking for. That's what I want to learn.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I do have one last one. Doc, are you going to be here for this one?
I can answer initially, and then I got to dip.
All right, so one of the things I think it's kind of weird is actually creating for your audience, the people that are actually coming in to read your comic books. Feels like so many people want to subvert expectations. I think you'll agree with me on this one, Doc. I want to talk to Liefeld. Nobody understands his own audience better than Robert Liefeld.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think anybody does. I think Ethan might, as great of a pitch man as he is, he thinks his audience is a little more comic fans than they really are. I think Zach is the same way. I think Kirkman and Miller might be a little bit the same way too. They're much more, some are fans of them personally, some are fans of their translations into other mediums. But I think Rob Liefeld knows Rob Liefeld's audience is into Rob Liefeld comics. And he knows exactly what his audience wants and gives it to him every time.
Couldn't agree more. Josh, do you think it's important? Like, if you were going to be a comic creator, you need to be able to identify your audience. When you think of somebody that has identified their audience, they've keyed in, and they're making sure to be hitting exactly what they want each and every time. Like, who do you think about? Bendis.
Oh, of course.
Tom King.
I don't know. That's kind of a tough one for me. I would say, Perch has rung Kirkman's bell a lot in this episode. I would say Kirkman's probably a good pick for that. Geoff Johns too. He definitely he knows what a DC audience is. He knows who the true DC fans are, and he kind of writes love letters to them all the time. So probably those two, I would say, would be my picks for that.
I wanted to say thanks to Doc for joining us today. It sounds like he's if he isn't already headed out, he's heading out.
Yeah, I'm leaving now. I got a contractor showing up in about 10 minutes.
Okay.
Nice. Well, thanks for joining us, buddy.
Take care, guys.
Yeah, take it easy, Doc.
All right, Perch, who do you think, or I'm not Perch, Pele, who do you think has identified their audience and each and every time that they're going out there to make sure that they're pleasing their audience, that they're subverting expectations, not veering too much, that they know who their guys are?
Geoff Johns, I would say. I would say Geoff Johns, because he really, if they would have just let him do what he was going to do with Rebirth, DC would have been in such a better position now. But probably Geoff Johns. I've got to go back to McFarlane too, because he knows his audience. He's built that audience over many, many, many generations of comics. Right now, he's one of the best, and there's let's see, build the audience over. I don't know. Probably maybe Pellegrini, as far as in crowdfunding, because he's really done a great job as far as the tapping into the more conservative customer base with POTUS Thump and Black Ops. So it's Yeah, as far as for indies, as far as crowdfunding goes, though, I would say them, Pellegrini and Lim.
I don't know, Perch. Do you have any good ones for this one as we kind of get ready to wrap this up? Who do you think has really identified their audience and knows how to really hit it every time and exploit them?
I think there's been some good names here mentioned. I think Brian K. Vaughan is probably somebody who understands who he's writing for and knows how to market to it. I think Gillian is another one.
Absolutely.
That knows his audience. And keep in mind, this is where there's some self-awareness here, and I think this is something that's lacking in comics right now. Is that you're not, if you can't create a mass market, big budget Michael Bay like comic that everybody is gonna buy, even though it may be crappy, play to your strengths. And this is where I see indie creators who are happy with their small, audience, but they have a very loyal audience. They have an audience that follows them from book to book. I think that's where Brian K. Vaughan does come in as knowing his audience. He knows who's going to follow him. He knows how to market to them. And I think
Jonathan Hickman.
I think Jonathan Hickman is that way. I think Marvel, of course, would like Jonathan Hickman to be more than what Jonathan Hickman is, but I think Hickman understands who he is, and I think I think somebody just mentioned in the chat. I think Sean Gordon Murphy, from kind of talking with him and the interview that we did and everything else, he knows his audience, and he knows, he wants to expand his audience. He wants to grow it, but he also knows the effort he needs to put in to keep that audience. And I think that's really critical. I'm sorry, I have to mention it. And I saw you put it up right now. We're talking about marketing, and we're talking about doing it well. And as we are talking, Valiant, through their official company Twitter, is asking fans to weigh in on what their favorite TV show is with a GIF. And it's like, you could not have better timing for a what the fuck are you doing as a corporation marketing your comics. What in the world are you doing? So I think that is absolutely insane.
Look who took over. I mean, look who took over Valiant and then just run them into the ground. So that tells you.
It's just this is failing.
Marvel's got cooking shows. Someone mentioned that. It's like
no,
they're not doing better.
You can't expand. I mean, it was kind of like the the Jurgens post earlier this week. I mean, you can't expand to a new audience and erode your base at the same time. You have to have a really clear understanding of who's bringing money to your table, and then grow from there, not at expense of there. So it is. It's nuts. But yeah, I think I do think Sean Gordon Murphy, I think some of the other people we've talked about, they understand their audience. They understand who they are, and they understand what they can bring to the table, and that's key.
Absolutely. So I think this has actually been a lot of fun. I didn't know what this was going to be like, but I think we were able to get through 11 topics pretty well as far as, fundamentals of comic book creation, and that was a lot of fun. But you guys want to do some comic recommendations? We got a few more minutes.
Yeah, always.
Let's do it. Josh, what are you recommending this week?
For this week coming, or the week that just
passed? The one we got through. What should people go pick up if they haven't read it yet?
I would definitely go pick up Speed Metal. That was pretty awesome. And I believe it was Williamson's last issue on The Flash as well, 762. Just a really nice cap off on his run. And that'd probably be it from my list. Of course, I got to recommend, Batgirl. That book was great. You recommended it yourself, Wes. So yeah, just Speed Metal and Flash 762 from me.
Oh, all right, Paley, what do you recommend at the shop this week?
Last God #9.
That's a damn good one.
Oh, fantastic book! Still my favorite DC title. I love it. Absolutely love the series. I've been hardcore for that series ever since it started. So that's my pick. Last God #9. Fantastic.
Fantastic. If you like fantasy storytelling and you're not reading that comic,
I don't know what to tell you. You got
it's damn good.
Mm-hmm.
What do you recommend this week, Perch? Oh, I'm sorry.
Clash of Kings, the George R. R. Martin. If you're disappointed in the way that the television show turned out, the comic's a lot better. So it's a hell of a lot better. So pick up those go back and get the back issues. Read that coming out now. It's a lot different than the series, than the TV series. It follows the books, and it's fantastic.
Thank you very much, Perch. What are you recommending this week? You read anything great yet?
Yeah, I like Gideon Falls. That's just a nice ongoing book. I like Maestro. I'm thinking of some things that haven't been mentioned. I wasn't as fond of Daredevil this week. I think, I like Low.
Or Venom. I thought they were both a little off.
They did feel. I mean, we're bridging arcs, I think. So there's a little bit of catch up going on there. I think it was an interesting week. I definitely liked the 2 Flash books. I also like Last God quite a bit. I find myself now, this is not a recommendation, but it's like, every now and then you go onto YouTube and you watch videos of like, Russian car accidents. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I do that. It's like, you see these kind of comedy things going on. And the Superman run, Action Comics, is like that. It's just watching a comical disaster every month.
Pele and I are going to talk about that on Monday.
Yeah, I get such enjoyment now from that book. I get legit enjoyment from that book. It's transcended into a car crash of a comic. It's not a good comic, but it is. You can pick it up, and it's some comedy. It's kind of how I feel in many cases about Savage Dragon. But this week, Savage Dragon decided to give us parodies of newspaper comics from the 50s and 60s for some odd reason. But anyway, I was hoping I'd like Juggernaut a lot more. It wasn't a bad book, but I really had really high expectations, and it wasn't quite there. But and
right there with you.
Yeah, and then Spider-Woman, I don't think vomited on anybody this week. I'm now looking back to make sure, but
Well, Immortal She-Hulk did. That was a stinker.
Yeah, Immortal She-Hulk was. Anyway, there's a bunch of comics out there that you were expecting more out of, and it just they weren't necessarily awful. They were just not what you hoped. No vomiting in Spider-Woman. So the vomiting check is a no with Spider-Woman. So we finally broke that streak. There you go.
So you guys mentioned most of my big recommendations. Obviously, I would still recommend Ten of Swords Creation #1. Although I would recommend opening the book to the page 35 and reading from there, because the first half of it was meandering and boring, in my opinion. But the second half of it was much more interesting, and I really enjoyed that. Another one was the Fantastic Four Antithesis from Mark Waid and who was it? It's
Neil Adams.
Neil Adams, absolutely. Much better than the first issue, which I thought was fine. I thought the first issue was okay. The second issue was much better, and I really enjoyed reading those this week. Otherwise, it was Flash, 762, Speed Metal, Last God, I thought were all great. Disappointed by Venom, disappointed by Juggernaut, disappointed by Daredevil. Even Maestro, which I thought was pretty good, I thought could have been better. I don't know.
It was a letdown from the first issue. It was.
Yeah. The art's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So I guess that'll do it, folks. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. Obviously, I just let the cat out of the bag. Pele and I are going to be talking about Action Comics on Monday. After this, Doc and I are going to be talking about Jerry Conway wanting to dismantle the comic book industry. And then obviously we'll have This Week in X-Men tomorrow as well. I think I should have Fatal J on the show talking about comic movie news and stuff like that too. So thank you all very much for coming. I had a lot of fun, and Salamapo.